I can take apologies for absence first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received from Councillors Adam Davis, Paxton Hood-Williams and Michael Locke, and also from David Roberts.
Thank you, Jeremy. We want to agenda item 2, which is disclosures of interest, please. Any disclosures? Mike, Councillor Mike.
Yes. Yes, Chair. Agenda item 6, the Internal Audit Strategy Draft Annual Plan 25-26. Appendix 3, and its relation to comprehensive schools and McGovern, Pentre Harvard.
Thank you very much, Councillor White. Councillor Mike Lewis.
I'm also Governor at Clears Primary.
Thank you very much. No other declarations? Excuse me. Moving on then to the minutes of the meeting of the 5th of March. If you take them page by page, please, for accuracy. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. Could I have some hands up if that's an accurate reflection? Thank you, Councillor Lewis. You, Gordon. Okay. Thank you very much. And our next item on the agenda is the Audit Wales report. And if I can welcome Gillian Gillett from Audit Wales to take us through this report, please, Gillian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just check everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, this is just our annual audit summary, which shows the work that we've completed since the last audit or annual audit summary, which was issued in March 2024. So there's nothing new in here that you're not already aware of. It's just a summary of things that have already come to the council and the committee. Just briefly, as you already know, the AGW gave an unqualified opinion on the council's accounts on the 25th of March and also issued the certificate confirming that the audit had been completed. And the findings from our accounts audit work were reported to you in our audit of accounts report in your March meeting. We've also reviewed the arrangements the council's put in place to secure value for money in the use of its resources. Our assurance and risk assessment work contributes to this and is also used to inform our planning work for future years. We've also undertaken a financial sustainability review, which was reported in September 24, and found that the council has reasonable arrangements to support its financial sustainability, but that there are weaknesses in the delivery and monitoring of the savings programme. Our ongoing work includes a thematic review on commissioning, local review on cyber security, the local review on risk management and unscheduled care, and these will come to you in due course. And the summary also draws attention to the national reports and products which we've published in 2024. And if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julian. I've certainly got no questions. I think we've seen this report before in a slightly different content, but obviously we've commented previously that the success of the unqualified opinion, and we've given thanks to our team and also to the council's finance team for getting to that position, albeit it was a little bit slower than normal, but we got there in the end, so thank you for that. Are there any questions from anyone for Gillian? No? Okay, thank you, Gillian. I appreciate you coming for that paper, and you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to stay in the meeting if you wish, or if you need to go, then please do.
Thank you.
If we can move on to the key section of our reports now for discussion, which is part A, and if I could welcome Simon Cockings, our Chief Auditor, to take us through agenda item 8. And thank you, Simon, for coming into the meeting today to deliver this. It is an important paper that sets the route and the legal requirements for Simon and his team to deliver. And I'm sure you'll find the report very comprehensive. May find it a struggle understanding some of it, but I can assure you Simon's gone through the detail of this with great time-consuming details. So I'm sure he'll take us through the bits he wants us to concentrate. Thank you, Simon.
Yes, thanks, Chair. This is agenda item number 5. The report provides some further background on the global standards that came into force on the 1st of April 2025. As I mentioned previously, they are very similar to the previous standards, but there are some enhancements, and I've gone through those in the report. It also provides a revised audit charter based on the requirements of the new standards. The revised charter was approved by CMT in February and comes to the committee for comment and approval today. The standards also suggest that committee terms of reference are updated to make reference of the new global standards, the application note, and the code of practice, as noted in section 4 of the report. The suggested amendments to the terms of reference can be seen on the Appendix A on page 52 of the pack. So as I mentioned, the global standards previously are very similar to the new ones. I've got some detail in the body of the report I wasn't going to go through. There are links in there for members to follow to look at the detail if they feel they need to. One point to note that the global standards do state some additional requirements for the new charter, as said in section 6.3, and those are reflected in the updated version of the charter in Appendix 1. So the charter itself starts on page 25. I'll just point out some differences really. The charter comes to this committee every year. So there are some additional elements that have been added to comply with the new standards. If you look at the contents page on page 26, I'll just highlight some of the new changes and additions. 1.6, there's a commitment to adhering to the global standards that's been introduced from this year. There's also a mandate in section 2.1, which outlines the legal position of internal audit in the local authority. There's also a new ethics and professionalism requirement for staff, which replaces the ethics requirement for the team. Again, that's in section 4.1. And then there's also some exceptions that are allowed from the standards based on the SIPFA application note. So the standards apply globally, but the application note stipulates how that is interpreted in the local authority setting. And those exceptions are noted in section 6.1. So hopefully members have had a chance to go through this document. It's quite lengthy. Obviously, if not, I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Recognising this is quite a technical document for those who are not immersed in internal audit and governance. So I respect, this may be a hard task for you to take through, but if there are any questions, please raise your hand. Or if you're not sure, I mean, myself or Simon would be happy to meet outside the meeting if there's any areas where you're not fully understanding the requirements of the new standards coming in. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, I certainly am not an expert actually in this, but Simon, how well prepared or how many changes do you have to actually make to the audit section to accommodate this?
Yeah, what I've done, Jeff, I've done a mapping exercise looking at the new standards compared to the old standards. The previous standards, we were provided with a checklist outlining the various points that we had to comply with. I'm still waiting that checklist from SIPFA at the moment, but I've created my own checklist and I've gone through that with a fine-tooth comb. As I mentioned previously, there's very little change really in terms of the old public sector standards and the new global standards. The principles are more or less the same. There are some additional elements that we've had to adhere to, and I put an action plan together which will be highlighted in my annual report in July. So I'm fairly confident we are compliant, Jeff. There's a few small improvements that can be made throughout the next 12 months to comply with the global standards, but just to be reassured, we are compliant with the new standards generally. It's well accepted that the new standards don't challenge anything different to the previous public sector ones, just enhance those really. So yeah, I've put an action plan together. I've gone through that with the chair and with the directors, just so they're aware of what changes need to be made, but nothing major, Jeff. You're on mute, Jeff.
Are you okay with that, Jeff?
Sorry, yes, I thought I'd taken the mute off, but yes, thanks, Simon, anyway.
Yeah. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, knowing this was obviously going to come in April now, Simon, have you had discussions with the opposite member colleagues within the other 21 authorities? And is the consensus generally the same on your findings of this document, and obviously going through it and trying to look at areas, you know. As the chair said, you know, if you obviously not got that expertise within the area, it is, you know, quite difficult to try and follow in some places. But just wondering whether you and perhaps your colleagues from the other 21 authorities have obviously gone through this document, and if the findings are more or less the same on the reading of the document.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This is not new to the Welsh Chief Auditors Group. We've discussed this for a number of months since before Christmas. The legislation came out in 2024, actually, so it's not new, the actual basic legislation for the global standards. So this isn't a new document, but some of the local application notes were only finalised in February 2025. So we have been waiting for, you know, specific guidance from our own standard setters, really SIPFA. Again, we've discussed this as part of the Welsh Chief Auditors Group, and those that attend that group are all of the same view, that the standards aren't really very different to the public sector standards. They just enhance those, really. But yeah, in my sort of analysis and checklist confirms we are compliant. Obviously, that will depend on each local authority. But if they are already compliant broadly with the public sector standards, then they would be broadly compliant with the global standard as well. So that's, you know, quite confident that would be a consensus across the piece.
Okay, thanks, Simon.
Julie Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, could I ask you to take a look at the alternative arrangements at paragraph 613? It's the board and senior management support. The alternative arrangement is that the Governance and Audit Committee will engage in but will not approve the internal audit budget and resource plan. We actually agree the audit plan. I accept that we don't have any input into the number of resources that you have available. So I'm wondering whether the wording could be changed slightly to clarify what is actually meant by resource plan, because reading our terms of reference at page 51, paragraph P, we say that we approve the internal audit charter and resources. So there is a bit of a mismatch, I think, between the two documents. So perhaps it's something that we could look at, you know, to clarify the wording.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Obviously, the alternative arrangement there is an alternative to the basic standards that are in the global standards wording. I agree, you know, the committee doesn't set the budget or set the resources. That is constrained with the local authority budget and, you know, the resourcing strategy. Yes, and I agree, obviously the committee doesn't actually set the resource requirement as per the terms of reference. So if we are going to be amending the terms of reference, Chair, it might be worth maybe amending that point in the terms of reference as well, to maybe just say that the committee approves the charter and approves the annual plan as opposed to the resource plan. That might be a better way to structure that phrasing.
Yeah, I think we just need to have a bit of clarity so there's consistency between the two documents. I absolutely agree that we don't approve the budget, but we do approve the days in the plan and the coverage of the plan. So it's just clarifying that. I think it's just
I think it's more the plan rather than the resources, because the resources are what we have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to take that back, Julie, and maybe come back to the committee with suggested amendments further to the already suggested amendments to the terms of reference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy for that. You may want to get the legal team just have a quick look at it and to just make sure that the wording is correct. That's all.
Just to make members aware, there is only a slight amendment suggested to the terms of reference, and that is to make a reference to the global standards, the application note from SIPFA, and also then the quality assurance programme, as noted on page 52. So it's not really changing the terms itself; it's just highlighting those documents in the terms of reference.
Yeah, I've seen those in a draft form with Simon yesterday, so I'm content with the inclusion of that reference. Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, on page 43, items 425 and 426, it talks of the difference between assurance and advice. Can you just clarify that to me, and particularly on 426, what additional roles you will be expected to have outside of audit?
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. Assurance really is where we've provided an opinion to the council on an audit. So we've provided a high, medium or low level of assurance. The other work is more or less advisory stuff. So if we are asked to be involved with projects, or if we're asked for guidance or changes to policies or procedures in that respect, because of our professional standing and our qualifications and experience, we might be asked on the odd occasion to feed into changing policies or changing systems. This very rarely happens, Gordon. Assurance is primarily our main goal and job as a team. Advisory services are also could be part of our responsibilities, but they're very few and far between. So I hope that explains the difference, Gordon.
Yes, okay, thank you.
In terms of the responsibilities, Gordon, obviously because of my independence as the chief auditor, if I was to be head of any other department or head of any other service that could be subject to audit, I would have to declare that because it could impair my independence. But as it stands, I'm only in charge of audit and fraud, which doesn't impede any independence, from my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Simon.
Right, Councillor Mike Lewis.
Just a question. In the new standards that you were indicating, is there anything that would impact members of the Governance and Audit Committee? And if there is it will be having training to cover that, basically?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Nothing majorly different in terms of the remit or the scope of the committee or the members. That's fairly static from the previous standards, so there's no new requirements really. Obviously, there's the governance requirements are set out in the existing charter, which has been updated to highlight those elements anyway. So the overall responsibilities of this committee and members in terms of audit and governance aren't really very different. I'm currently putting together a training package both for my team and for this committee, and I plan to roll that out over the summer. Obviously, once all of the end of year stuff is done, and any new members are elected to the committee as well, so it'll be a timely time to do that training. But yeah, there is training on the way on both the new standards and how we actually deliver internal audit as well for any new members.
Thank you, Simon. Just on the basis of training, if you recall, we asked for training to be undertaken around the new standards, which is on our work programme. And I've asked Simon if he could look to see what questions keep coming up for him around certain topics so that he can concentrate on those particular questions. One is understanding the assurance ratings that are given. If the committee members are clear what that means, then hopefully that will avoid those questions keeping on coming back up. So anything that keeps popping up from meeting to meeting, it may be from different people, then I think anything we can do to improve the understanding of committee members, I think would be good. So I think you're going to consider that in the training plan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The previous training session I did last year for members does cover a lot of those topics. Obviously, the new training will include information on the new standards that are coming in, any differences or any other requirements. But I think there is a recording that Jeremy may be able to distribute on the previous training session that might cover some of those areas. It's a refresh prior to the next training session, and obviously the new standards will be part of the new training session this summer.
Thank you, Simon. It's just one or two things for me. Within the standards, there's a requirement of the Governance and Audit Committee to meet at least annually with the auditors, both external audit and internal audit, without senior managers or officers being present. So that gives both sets of auditors an opportunity to be open and to raise any concerns or any issues with members of the Governance and Audit Committee without any officers being present. So what I've suggested is that we build that into our work programme, Jeremy. So if we can add a particular time that suits both sets of auditors when to do that, and whether it's a 10-minute early session, a bit like what we had with Sarah today, just to have that conversation. I would imagine it would only take 10 minutes to, 5 minutes each, I think would be enough just to comply with the terms of reference of the Governance and Audit Committee, but also to give you a contact, both sets of auditors got access to me at any time they wish, but I think it would be nice for that informal discussion with with.
Yeah, I agree, Chair. That is part of the another requirement of the new standards to meet at least once a year, independently of any other officers, directly with the committee. I know we've done it in the past. I think myself and Gillian met with the committee previously and found it quite helpful. It gives us a chance to air any issues with yourselves and the other members, and for you to do the same for us. So it is very productive in that respect.
Okay, so that's in train, so to speak. And the other thing I would say is there are, under the application note, there are some alternative arrangements which Simon is proposing. I think we should note those for the purpose of understanding why the reasons are those alternative arrangements are in place. I've looked at them, I've got no concerns, and I fully understand why those alternative arrangements have been put into place, but just for the committee to note those particular areas which Simon has already highlighted for us.
If I can just pick up on that point, Chair, the application note is provided by SIPFA, so the suggested alternatives aren't generated by myself. They are industry standard differences for public sector application. The global standards are very much generic across all public sector organisations, so they aren't specific to local government and particularly not specific to Wales. So the application note variances are generally approved across the local authority sector. So it's not something I've made up off my own back. They are, industry standard alternatives.
Okay. There are no further questions then. Thank you for that paper. I know it's a hard task in presenting that. It's two recommendations for it. One is to review and approve the update to the charter, and the other is to review and approve the Governance and Audit Committee terms of reference. I think we can. Do we need to take a vote?
Process then get approved by council.
Can we put some hands up to support both of those documents? Yeah. Hands up from those. Councillor Wharton, yeah. Yeah. Okay then. All in favour? Okay, that's. But thank you, Simon. I know that's quite a big piece of work, and it's taken you some time. So I'm grateful for that coming to the committee.
If I could just mention, Chair, obviously, the annual plan that's due to come in July will also have some further information on the new standards and our compliance. So just to make members aware and give you assurance, I am working on that at the moment to confirm our compliance, and that will be demonstrated in the annual report. So you'll see that, in black and white then in July. So hopefully it'll give you better assurance that we are monitoring it and confirming assurance going forward.
Leslie?
Yeah, just going back to our terms of reference, and with reference to what Julie said earlier, whilst I think the terms of reference are fine now, and we've just voted for it, I think we need to address that point that Julie raised.
Absolutely.
About point P. So,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you saw in chat, I thought, in fact, the answer would be simply to remove the words "and resources," because it's that bit that's not relevant. And in fact, the rest of that phrase basically encompasses exactly what the purpose is. But I think we might need to think a bit more about it.
I think the terms of reference comes back to a future meeting. I think more it's June, July time. I think we see them again.
Okay.
Might be part of the Audit Committee annual report.
Yes,
from memory, I think it is, Chair.
It is, yeah.
So we could make some amendments before that
Yeah.
that meeting, and then maybe approve the changes at that meeting. Obviously,
Yeah.
then needs to go to council for ultimate approval
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. I think that ties in with the council's approval of our annual report as well. So I absolutely agree that needs to be noted and changed, but we got another opportunity to make any other changes up until the annual report is ready.
Yeah, the committee annual report, I'm currently working with yourself, Chair, to put that together now, so we can make some amendments to that and bring it back to the July meeting with further suggested amendments, and then take it further from there.
Thank you, Councillor Wharton. If we could move on then to agenda item 6, which is the internal audit strategy and draft annual plan. Over to you again, Simon.
Yep, thanks, Chair. This report presents the draft internal audit plan for 25-26. The standards, both the old and the new global standards, require that the audit plan is linked to a strategy document, which outlines how the service will be delivered. The strategy and the draft audit plan were approved by CMT in February and now come to the committee for comment and ultimate approval. As you are aware, CMT review the plan and approve it prior to coming to this committee, but it's this committee's responsibility to approve the ultimate plan for 25-26. Just one slight change to note in 2.7 for the 25-26 plan. I've allocated a greater number of days to contingency to allow greater flexibility in the plan throughout the year, both to undertake any ad hoc pieces of work that come from CMT's requests, or any work that is requested by the committee, or anything that I personally see fit to review after looking at the performance reports or anything else that comes on my desk, basically, that I feel warrants an audit review. So the contingency has been increased this year to 90 days, as you'll see in the plan in the appendices. So the strategy itself starts on page 76 in Appendix 1. This just outlines how we will deliver the audit function throughout the year and how it's placed and how we actually undertake the work. The appendices then are on page 85 onwards. Appendix 2 is an overarching summary of the draft plan as it stands for 25-26. And then the detailed plan is in Appendix 3 from page 87 onwards. One other slight amendment or change following the global standards that I'd like to highlight. A lot of the local authorities have picked up on this, that the new standards stipulate that we actually try and allow more training for our internal audit staff. Obviously, our existing staff have to complete the mandatory training and corporate training, but it's been very limited sort of direct audit training or audit related training in the past. So I'm working with other colleagues in local authorities across Wales and our neighbouring authorities to try and source any audit relevant training or fraud related training that we could roll out throughout 25-26. That is part of my work plan for the next 12 months. Other than that, Chair, obviously the appendices speak for themselves in terms of the plan itself. So I'm happy to take any questions from yourself or other members.
Any questions from members for Simon, please, on this strategy or the draft audit plan? Julie?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon, for this comprehensive report. I do have a number of questions, so apologies, you'll probably be sick of hearing my voice by the end of this. The first question I wanted to ask in terms of the plan is, I recognise that you and your team have worked hard to deliver the annual audit opinion in the last couple of years, despite having lost a large number of days to sickness. And I understand that you've put together a plan that is going to be achievable by recognising the reduction in days from potential sickness absence. But I wondered if you could give the committee assurance that the plan has sufficient resources to audit key council risks rather than formulating a plan which is based on available days.
A few points there, Julie. Obviously, I have built in some contingency both for sickness absence based on historical trends over the last couple of years, and also a vacancy provision as well, just in case we unfortunately have any vacancies, which has been the case over previous years. I agree, Julie, it's been a challenge, in the last couple of years with exactly those issues. Just to give committee some assurance, this year's annual plan, as I mentioned in the previous meeting, we've actually hit 76% completion at the end of Q4. So I'm quite pleased in terms of the team's performance again in this year, in terms of this year's annual opinion. So this plan has been constructed to try and take account of as many those inconsistencies or sickness or vacancies as possible. You can't predict the unpredictable, unfortunately, but there are built-ins in the plan to try and make sure it is deliverable within those resource limits. In terms of the risk element, Julie, a lot of the plan is risk-based. As you can see, that we've prioritised the fundamental audits, which are the key audit systems for the council. The cross-cutting reviews, again, provide assurance of key risks on the risk register in some cases. And again, as part of the consultation exercise, I did ask all heads of service to highlight any new or imminent risks as part of that to be built into the plan. So where we have been able to, Julie, we have taken those key risks and built them into this audit plan for 25-26.
Okay, thank you. And it is of comfort to the committee, I'm sure, that you do have a number of contingency days. So any risks that arise during the financial year, you'll have the capacity to consider them. My second question is, at the February 2025 Governance and Audit Committee, a review of the new risk management system, framework and policy was removed from your work plan, as you told us that Audit Wales were due to undertake a review in Q4. Could you confirm whether that work has started, please?
Yes, thanks, Julie. I believe Audit Wales held a number of interviews recently in relation to the new risk management system and policy. I was interviewed as part of that process, and I believe Ness was interviewed as well, and I believe the chair was also. So that review is ongoing, and that is the reason why we deferred that risk audit pending the outcome of the Audit Wales review. I've not had an update on the conclusion of that. I'm not sure if Gillian is still on the call. Maybe she might be able to give us an update, but that audit is ongoing as we speak, Julie.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
I
My
think-
third. Oh, sorry.
I just add, I was engaged with that discussion as well with Ness and with Simon to defer it because I think the work Audit Wales were undertaking was quite in depth. So we thought it was beneficial to hold any internal audit activity until after that had been reported. Gillian, you back in. Do you know what progress has been made against that?
Sorry, no, I don't know the details. I know it's ongoing. I can try and find out if you want to know more details of when that's likely to be reported to you.
It would be helpful, please, if you can.
Yeah, I will take that back and find out for you.
Okay, thank you. Julie, do you want to carry on?
Thank you. Yes, thanks. Many of the review scopes, now I understand that at this stage you have a draft scope which will be fine-tuned when you are ready to commence the audit, but a number of review scopes are listed as a review of compliance. So can you outline how these will conform to the global standards requirements of looking at the whole council's operation and assessing value for money, please?
Yeah, where it says assessing compliance, those audits are quite generic, so they would look at standard audit areas. So the standard audit program would look at income, expenditure, GDPR, procurement, use of purchase cards. So there are standard tests that a lot of the audit programs have in place. So that would be a generic audit program for that particular establishment or team of people, should we say. So that would give us assurance that obviously they are complying with the various policies and procedures of the council, HR policies, procurement policies, cabinet instructions, and all the basic requirements of the local authority compliance. In terms of value for money, Julie, a lot of the audits look at the value for money elements as part of the basic programme as well. So it's all built into a standard generic audit programme, if that makes any sense. That's why I've not really stipulated any detail in the audit plan itself, because there is a generic programme in place for those audits.
Right. So is there room to expand it to look at things like performance?
It depends on the establishment we're looking at, Julie. You know, if there are PIs or KPIs in a particular area, we do look at those as part of the generic programme as well. In terms of performance targets, deliverables, they are reviewed if they are relevant, you know, to that particular audit. They won't be relevant to all audits necessarily, but where there are PIs and KPIs and performance targets, and we do look at those. As an example, looking at the AP or AR KPIs, you know, recovery rates for business rates, etc. We do cover those as part of the generic testing.
Okay, thank you. And could I ask you a question on the whistleblowing review? The scope is noted as reviewing adherence to the council's whistleblowing policy and recording. And again, I accept that this is at draft scope stage at the moment, but could you consider looking at other risks such as fitness for purpose of the policy and the risks to the council of not receiving whistleblowing, such as staff perceptions in terms of their protection if they do whistleblow?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. We do have an ethics and values audit on the programme as well, which would look at the overall ethics and, you know, whistleblowing acceptance across the organisation and just the culture, really, in terms of that respect. This audit is not a new one. It's been done a number of times in the past. It does look at the number of cases that we've had in, how those cases are dealt with, whether they've been dealt with appropriately. But the point you've raised, Julie, I can take a look at that as part of the consideration for this review for 25-26 and build those elements in as necessary.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I think a risk worth looking at is the non-whistleblowing activity of, you know, whistleblowing that isn't received through the standard route. In terms
if I
of,
can come in, there, I think the link to the ethics is critical for you, Simon, and I'm glad you raised that link as well. So good.
Thank you.
Sorry, Julie.
No, it's okay. In terms of the education audits, I note that 40 days have been allocated to the audits of comprehensive school. As you've got limited audit resources, and you've explained to the committee in previous meetings how useful the thematic reviews have been in primary schools, I was wondering whether there's any opportunity to consider expanding the thematic review to cover key risk elements of comprehensive schools, or perhaps considering using methodologies like the control risk self-assessment audits.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. In terms of the thematic reports and reviews we've used those primarily for the primary schools based on the size of the population of those schools. There's a lot more primary schools across Swansea than there are comprehensive schools. And obviously the spend within those primary schools is slightly lower than you'd see in a large comprehensive. So the risk is slightly lower in terms of, you know, the risks of expenditure, because the 90% of the salary costs cover their budget. So there's not such of a risk with the primaries. Obviously, the comprehensives are larger businesses, essentially, with a greater spending power. And so, in my opinion, they warrant individual reviews as opposed to thematics. Could be something we consider going forward, Julie. You know, we could do a thematic review of procurement across the comprehensives. Again, that would mirror the primary schools, but because of the size and the increased risk of those larger organisations, that's why we've included them as a separate audit on the plan going forward for each individual comp.
Okay, thank you. And my, I think Councillor White has his hand up.
Yeah. Councillor White.
Yeah, coming in on Julie's last point, I know following the full year scrutiny inquiry on procurement, and we did notice that obviously via our audit and government that lots of schools weren't familiar with the procurement process, which probably apart from school staffing is another area where they would have a big spend. I know now that following the recommendations from that procurement inquiry panel, schools are now have been forwarded given the
It's frozen.
It's frozen.
Yeah.
Councillor White, you've been frozen. His internet's gone down.
Okay, would you like me to continue with my last question then?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I noted that there were several low risk reviews included on the plan. So could you provide assurance to the committee as to how these contribute to your annual audit opinion, please?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I did pick up on this. I was expecting this question because there are a few low risk audits on the plan. If you remember when you had I think it was governance training from Max Caller, I've wanted to build some of the low risk audits in primarily because they've not been looked at for a number of years or a significant number of years. So they are still recorded on my audit universe as areas across the council to be looked at. Yes, they are low risk. But they were assessed as low risk when we last did the audit. So, for example, Victoria Park kiosk is assessed as being low risk. But we've not audited that probably in the past 6 years. It was closed during lockdown and through COVID. So my opinion is that I need to be alert of everything across the council as far as possible. So I'd like to be able to look at things, even if they are low risk, just to make sure things are working effectively in those areas to, again, inform my opinion across the organisation. So it does give me the breadth. I agree, you know, there's not a lot of resource being allocated to the low risk audits. It's a small part of the plan. But for breadth and coverage and assurance across the organisation, I feel it's important to try and keep a track of these as much as possible. Does that make sense, Julie?
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
I think I described those as focused and sharp pieces, just to give you an insight as to whether it's right or wrong. So I would support that approach.
There are some low risk, and there's some other 5-day audits on the plan that are quite focused pieces of work that have come from my review of the risk register, of performance reports, or direct requests following issues that have been highlighted, Julie. So there is a reason for them being on the plan, and obviously they will provide assurance not just to us, to the directors, and then also to inform my annual opinion as well for the AGS.
Thank you. Councillor White, you froze for a while, but you're back now. Do you
Yeah,
want to continue?
I was stuck in your as well. No, in regards to Julie's point in education, as you know, we carried out a full year's inquiry on procurement because we were finding that schools weren't afraid with perhaps the process, and that's probably the second biggest spend apart from staffing that schools have. But I know that education now, I've sent all that information on the actual procurement process to schools so they can follow.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. I believe the schools have also had additional training from the procurement team as well for try to enhance compliance. I know Chris Williams has done a lot of work with internally on procurement and with the schools to try and improve compliance. But it's a moving object, Mike. You'll always pick up on some non-compliance in procurement in comprehensives, and again, because of the level of spend, I think it's important to try and keep those as individual reviews because they do spend a lot of money compared to a primary.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Leslie Walter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just going back to the point about low risk or audits of low risk, I can understand, yes, the priority has got to be not low risk because there's where they're more likely to have an issue. But I've always felt that if you don't check low risk, they suddenly become high risk. So you have to keep on top of them, even if it's just a light touch audit. So as long as that is what you're doing, I think I totally support that they are still got to be in the plan.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. You'll probably see in the plan the number of days allocated to low risk audits is fairly small. The priority has been given to the fundamentals and the bigger pieces of work, the higher risk areas. But I completely agree with what you say, Councillor Walton. I wouldn't be sleeping at night if I didn't try and look at things as far as I could to check things were still compliant. Because if you don't look at something for 6 years, you're not convinced that it is still compliant, basically.
I think those low risks, it only takes a day for you to walk in, you get a feel straight away whether it's working well or not.
Yeah.
So I think they're short, sharp pieces of audit work, and it would give an insight for a future audit piece of work if anything further needed to be done. Okay then, just one or two comments from me. One is just to note the positive change of your ongoing review of risk registers throughout the period. So if any risk changes in any way, then you've got the contingency to respond to that and to build in additional work. So I think that is a positive change in your approach. So well done on that. And that's on paragraph 2.7. I was pleased to see that. I had a conversation with Simon yesterday around the strategy, and I just picked up one minor issue regarding his comments around the internal audit service delivery with training needs. And Simon reported that staff are encouraged to undertake appropriate training. I asked if that could be turned to required audit training on the basis that some of that training would be mandatory. Encourages gives a different option to a required training need, and Simon's agreed to do that. I'm pleased to hear Simon commenting on the training opportunities that he's seeking to further enhance the skills of the team. And I'm quite excited to see that because we've questioned Simon about training and audit needs before, so I'm pleased to see that's got a real focus now. So again, a well done on that one.
If I can come back to that point for training, Chair. Obviously, this is enhanced really with the new global standards. There are far more stipulations on development and training of the team. Unfortunately, since COVID, we haven't been able to procure sort of training sessions for audit for new starters, for example. They used to be run by Newport Council, and we would pull from that audit training resource quite frequently for new starters. But unfortunately, that ceased during COVID and hasn't really recommenced. So all of the local authorities are in the same position with availability of dedicated, specific audit relevant training. So it is something that we're working as a group of local authorities, as a team, to try and identify possible training opportunities, maybe joint training, with other neighbouring local authorities online, and procuring training for the team. So it is something that we are, actively pursuing, and we'll be looking at as part of the appraisal process going forward as well.
That's great, that is, and perhaps you can keep us up to
Of course.
date on that, because I think that's important to for you and for the team, really. And it's, as you say, it's a requirement to the standards now. So.
And not to say they aren't doing their training. Encouraged is required. Yeah, I understand that. But obviously the required corporate training, I make sure the team are up to date on all of that training periodically anyway.
Okay, and the only other question or comment I made with Simon yesterday was around the risk management review, to see whether he could include the link between the directorate or service areas to the corporate risk register, to see how that escalation and de-escalation process works. And Simon said that he'd already had that on his radar, and he was going to do that. I have no other questions for Simon on the plan. So if there are no more, can I just thank you, Simon, for both of these documents. I know it took some time to do them, and from personal experience, I know how long it takes to deliver the plan. So we've been asked to review and approve the audit strategy and draft annual plan for 25-26. Can I have some hands up for consensus, please? Oh, yeah, hands up, and all okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks all.
Okay, and we're moving on now to the absence management agenda item 7, absence management employment of agency worker audit update. Is that you, Ness?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Chair.
Welcome, Ness.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not there in person today, Chair. I thought we'd gone purely online, but I'll make sure I'm there next time. So this report updates the committee on the position in respect of absence management and agency workers, and it follows the 2024 internal audit report of absence, for which we had a moderate opinion, and a much older report on agency workers from 21-22. But given the link between the two things, we bring both to committee to update you. So the first section of the report looks at the audit recommendations in respect of absence management. There were 10 recommendations, of which 7 are now complete. 2 of the remaining 3 relate to the policy process and actually are being addressed through the new policy, which is going to the JCC next week for formal sign-off. So they will be addressed in the very near future. And the last one relates to sickness absence letters, and that's related to an Oracle Fusion, the need for development in Oracle Fusion. So that'll happen during the course of 25-26 as part of our development programme. Section 3 of the report updates the committee on our sickness absence statistics and the actions that we're taking. So it reports that in 24-25, our sickness rate for the whole council, including schools-based employees, was 12.3 days per full-time equivalent employee, which is an increase on the previous year of when it was 10.7. Unfortunately, at the moment, we can't give you a comparison with other councils in Wales for 24-25, as the data has not yet been compiled. But if we look at the previous year in 23-24, what we can see is that at that time, only 5 councils had a lower rate of sickness than us. We'll have to wait for the new stats to be able to see how we, how we stand next to those later in the year. So as the report identifies, the rates of sickness do vary across directorates, and that reflects the different nature of the services that each directorate provides to a certain extent, but also we can conclude that the rate of sickness that we're seeing is actually attributable to a number of factors. There isn't one sort of overwhelming reason as to our level of sickness. So the increase in part, we think, is to do with an improved reporting compliance, because we have put an extra focus on sickness absence management in 2024-25, but also it's a reflection of national trends that we're seeing in illness across the country, and increasing chronic conditions and more complex health needs, mental health as well, prevalence, and also the fact that we have an increasingly aging workforce. So notwithstanding that we understand the sort of plethora of reasons why our sickness rates are where they are, we have been acting decisively throughout 2024-25 to try and manage our sickness absence as best as we can. So we now have dedicated sickness advisors in the larger directorate, so they are given the responsibility to keep a very close eye on all our sickness cases and to ensure that the processes are being followed. We also have, as the committee and as we've reported previously, been reviewing our sickness absence management policy, and we have revised that now. It's been developed in close collaboration with staff, with trade unions and with our Occupational Health Service. And that policy, as I say, is going to the JCC next week. So it will be implemented from the 1st of May. And it takes really our kind of approach from one which was very process-driven compliance approach to a more compassionate, evidence-led and support-focused approach, trying to focus on recovery and staff retention. So you'll see in the report the key reforms are about changing our approach to focus more on long-term sickness absence. We know that our percentage of long-term sickness absence hasn't changed between years and runs at nearly 80%. So that's the area that we need to focus on more. We've also developed a comprehensive training programme to accompany the rollout of the new policy, and that will be ready and available for staff to engage with from the beginning of May. And then the other thing that we've done is reshaped our Occupational Health Service. So we are in the process of recruiting an additional occupational health advisor and also a student nurse placement to enhance capacity. And we've also in the process of procuring a new employee assistance programme, and that's will be available to every single member of staff and is designed to try and give as early support as possible to individuals so that they perhaps don't need more specialist support or need to go off on sickness absence. Section 4 of the report then talks about monitoring and evaluation. So looking at the arrangements that we're putting in place so that we know where we are with our performance and we can monitor the impact of the changes that I've just referred to. So we'll have monthly management information reports and then quarterly reports to corporate management team, as well as reviewing occupational health and the employee assistant programme data alongside that sickness absence data, so we can see the impact of the changes that we're making. We've also, as CMT, asked internal audit to undertake a review of sickness absence management in the third quarter of 24-25, and you will note that that's not currently within the draft annual plan that you've just been discussing, but Simon and I have talked about the scope of that contingency element, those additional 90 days to be able to accommodate such a review in the third quarter. And the final element of the monitoring and evaluation is a review of the policy and of the training after 12 months, so we can take full stock of the changes and the impact that they hopefully will have on our overall sickness absence rates. Section 5 of the report then looks at the agency update, and the committee will recall that we had a new contract with ALS that's now been operational for about 6 months, and the analysis shown in the pie chart on page 110 shows that the primary reasons for having agency workers aren't linked to sickness absence, but more linked to sort of planned and predictable absences, such as maternity leave or seasonal demand for service. And the other point to make on the agency workers is that so far, it appears that we are getting better value for money as the costs for the sort of similar period in 2024-25 are slightly lower than the previous provider. So in conclusion, Chair, I just sort of leave the committee with the kind of a reassurance that we recognise the scale and complexity of our sickness challenge. We're not alone. You know, all councils across Wales and probably the UK are seeing sickness absence akin to ours, very much for the reasons that I've previously stated, but we are providing a strategic response to that, and that's already underway. So through our absence management policy, through strengthened OC health and the employee assistance programme, through improved training and dedicated sickness absence manager officers, all of that together marks a shift in our approach to sickness absence management. It's pleasing to see that agency work isn't being used to mask sickness trends, but it is actually being used in a planned way at lower cost with a new provider. Just again to reassure you that we will be monitoring the effectiveness of the measures that we're putting in place, and the outcome of the next internal audit review will obviously be reported to the committee, and we'll undertake a full review of the changes we've put in place in 12 months. So that's a sort of brief run through the report, but happy to take any questions or comments from committee members.
Thank you, Ness. There are some hands up, but I would just like to say, you know, the huge amount of work that's gone into putting this in focus that it required, and what you've achieved and are doing to date is commendable, really, and really pleasing to see the reduction in agency costs by going along with the ALS provider, and also the rigour you're applying to monitoring of an evaluation of what you do in a period of time, and also the involvement of the internal audit team. So if I can ask Councillor Mike White first, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ness. Yeah, in regards to the policy, obviously been rolled out, hopefully agreed and implemented in May. In regards to the section 4, 3.5 million related to obviously regarding the design of the policy. I was going to touch on the obviously monitoring for managers, which you have sort of addressed in section 4, but will it be HR support for managers to ensure that they are carrying out the interview process properly when interviewing staff who are hopefully going to come back into work?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, in the larger departments, as I say, they all have or are in the process of having a dedicated sickness absence officer, and that'll be part of their role. But also the business, the sort of employment partners who are within HR are also there to provide that support if required. So it's only corporate services and finance that won't have a dedicated sickness absence officer, and that's just because the size of our directorates in staffing terms doesn't require that, but we will be able to be supported by our HR partners throughout the kind of the year. And really the performance management information around sickness absence will help us identify whether or not there are areas that we need to particularly focus on or particularly get support, and those reports come to us as directors and are then considered at our DMT and PFM meetings monthly, and enable us to go into quite a lot of detail if we need to.
Okay, thanks, Ness. Thank you.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, Ness. It's really just a comment, a positive comment. I'm personally pleased to see that there seems to have been a bit more of a shift to a more compassionate approach to people's sickness. I mean, I know there are always going to be people who are slightly pulling a fast one, but the vast majority aren't. And I've always felt if you treat them with compassion and understanding, you've got far more likely, one, that they'll recover, and two, they'll come back and be a positive addition back into the workforce. So personally, I think it's the right way to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walton. Julie?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question as well about the new officers that have been employed. Oracle workflows, I understand, were director managers were usually designed to streamline the sick absence process, and I accept that managing high levels of sickness absence will divert managers away from their operational duties. But does the creation of sick management officers erode the financial benefits of the previous streamlined process? I am aware that you've said that you'll monitor the effectiveness, and I welcome that.
So a couple of things, Julie. So in the Place Directorate and Social Services, they aren't new. They do already exist. In education, it's a new appointment that's currently been recruited to, but they're not there to sort of prompt people in terms of the workflow. They're there to help support more complex cases. And so to ensure that, you know, there's the support there for managers where, you know, the cases of long-term sick can often be quite complex, and to just work with them to support that, that we take the compassionate approach, that we make the reasonable adjustments that we need to make to help support people come back to work. So it isn't just a sort of process of have you done this bit or have you done that bit. It's a more involved engagement with managers to help managers feel properly supported to be able to manage sickness absence effectively.
Oh, thank you for clarifying. And a second point, if I can, on the sickness policy training, can you outline what testing has been performed on the training programme and what support will be available for managers during the early days? And do you have any contingency built in for managers who are perhaps on holidays or on another form of absence when the new policy is launched?
So the training is being provided through an e-learning module, and that has been developed, and then it will be tested with a number of people before it actually goes live to just check it's understandable and that it's helpful and user friendly. But that will be available. And then what we've also done is we've included within individual staff appraisals, and this comes right down from the chief executive to directors to heads of service and through the organisation, that this training will be mandatory and it needs to be completed by all members of staff by the 30th of June. So in that time, everybody will have done it. They will also have the support of their HR business partners and these sickness absence officers as well. So if somebody, having done the course, is still needing additional support, there will be that support available to them.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeff Jones?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and yeah, thanks for the report. Really, a lot of interesting figures there. It'd be good to see the 24-25 figures when they actually do come out. And I don't know if you can name the councils as well, and do you actually work with these, shall we say, councils to see what perhaps they do compared to what we do, if there are any improvements. I know you've actually highlighted the causation or some of the causes of ill health and so on, mental health, and you actually say age, an aging workforce, which is perhaps one of the causes. One figure that perhaps stands out to me, I try to look at, what's actually caused the illness. Is it an internal factor or external pressures? You mentioned mental health throughout the communities, throughout the country. One figure that stands out really for me, occupational health capacity and strategy has been reshaped to meet rising demand. Ill health retirements appointments have risen by 28%. What's behind that?
So there's quite a lot in there to unpack, Jeff. So let me start with the comparison data with other councils. Is that Data Cymru collects the data for the councils, and unfortunately for some reason, they have not yet published the 23-24 data, which is why what we've given you is the data we've collected from 20 of the 22 councils for 23-24. So we're kind of at the, we have to wait for Data Cymru to publish the full figures for us to be able to give you that 24-25 picture, and we can do that probably by the time we get to the next time we come to committee, which is hopefully after the internal audit review that'll happen in the third quarter. We'll have that data available for you. But we the head of HR, Rachel Davis, is a member of the local government HR directors network and is actually president of that this year, and that network meets very regularly. I think it meets quarterly, if not more frequently, and so in that forum they discuss the workforce challenges that they're experiencing, and sickness absence is a common theme for councils to be discussing and sharing good practice, and that's how we got the data that we've got for 23-24 by gathering through that network. And we'll continue to have those discussions and pick up on any good practice or shared learning we can through that way. And then the next question you had was about the different sickness causes. So we know that the biggest cause for sickness across the council is mental health reasons, whether that be stress or depression or bereavement, or a number of those factors, but all under the heading, I guess, of mental health, and that those percentages are very consistent with the sort of level that you see in the general population. We do have an ageing workforce, which means that particularly in our services, which are more frontline and perhaps involve more manual type work, we're seeing sickness rates linked to that as well. I think those are probably the sort of two key areas. But what we've also doing is looking at the data for the whole year and really trying to analyse it from all different sort of perspectives, so that we have a very rich understanding of what the causes of sickness are, and then what actions we might be able to take to help support or avoid people being off sick in the first place. So we're looking at it through an age demographic, through a gender demographic, from the type of service people are working in, through all those different lenses, so that we can get as good as an understanding of the causes of sickness and how our responses to that can have a positive effect. Does that cover everything you asked, Jeff, or have I missed something?
Well, yes, it does. It's a bit of an open question, really. I was thinking as well, I did mention about internal and external pressures, mental health. So we're actually saying that society as a whole, shall we say external society, not the council, is the main driver of a lot of the sickness.
I think what we can say is that it's consistent with the kind of sickness levels you're seeing across the population as a whole. We do have the ability to identify whether or not, if it's a stress-related absence, whether it's work-related. We know that we don't have we collect information on whether or not, if you have an accident at work and you take sickness, those are very, very low figures, so they aren't a factor for us in terms of the overall trend. But we do have a combination of work-related stress and non-work related stress. We're seeing increased numbers as well in terms of bereavement, number of days people are off with bereavement, and that again may reflect an ageing workforce. So we're seeing more people who are off, because their parents are passing, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, hi Ness, thank you for your report. And following on from the last item you were talking about, it's in report 2.92. Which is employees are absent for stress-related reasons should be immediately referred to stress counselling, which is very welcome. But is there a process to improve management to get involved in early intervention to address the cause of such stress-related absence and to remedy the cause at an earlier date?
I think, absolutely. If the stress is work related, then we have in place stress risk assessments, which can help us to have a discussion with an employee about the sort of causes or the triggers of things that are stressing them, and then the adjustments that we can make to help reduce that level of stress. And ideally, as long as we've identified that that person is experiencing stress, we can do that before they go off on sickness absence. The addition of the employee assistance program will also help if it's not a work-related stress aspect. And we do also, through the stress management and counselling service, provide both urgent counselling provision for those individuals who are deemed to be at high risk, and then in slower time counselling sessions are available for all staff as well, although the waiting times are higher than we would like, which is why I think the employee assistance programme will be so beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ness. There are no other questions. Again, I think, we as a committee, we need to note the huge amount of work that's going into this, give it focus, and to bring the situation under a reasonable level of control, but recognising the external pressures that I think public are facing generally with the living environment that we're currently in, and the financial pressures everybody's under. If there are no further questions, thank you, Ness.
Thank you.
And we can move on to agenda item 8, which is the annual complaints and compliments report. Is that you, Sarah? Welcome. Take us through that, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'll just briefly highlight some key points in the report. So this is the mid-year complaints report for 24-25. As you know, the main report comes to the committee when we get the Ombudsman letter, which is usually around September time. So the Ombudsman, you'll see in the report, the Ombudsman did publish some information in January about the first half of that year, saying that they received more complaints. They logged more complaints, and councils upheld slightly more complaints for that first 6 months. But the main themes were, as you would expect, the large services across the council around waste, housing and social services, and that's consistent with what you're seeing in the report. The complaints, the corporate complaints KPI, that improved compared to the same period in 23-24. So although there was more stage 1, the justified amount was the same. The stage 2 complaints increased very slightly. Justified did double, however, this is still a relatively small number, and in the context of the volume of the service requests received for those areas, it's still not significant or an area for major concern. It's also, as I said, in line with what the Ombudsman were finding around the service areas as well. Adults social services performance improved across most of those indicators. A slight decline in stage 1, but the number again still relatively low, so no cause for concern with those. Social services, child and family, significant improvement in most of the areas, slight decline in some, but again no cause for concern, again small numbers. You'll see in the report we've highlighted as well where there's been financial redress, and again the numbers for the year will come in the annual report in September. For the first time, we've put the compliments as well in this mid-year report. We always include the compliments in the main report, but not usually in this one, but we have put them in this one. So there's 400 compliments across all the services. Top ones were highways, but then significant numbers in both adults and child and family services. And one of the risks and issues that we've talked about previously in the annual report is the number of social services complaints investigators. It's been difficult for us to recruit, and it's a very relatively small pool across Wales. But we have managed to recruit some more investigators, and our waiting list has reduced as a result. And as I say, I'll be bringing the main report in the autumn to you. Some of the social services and social services complaints numbers do change then, because some of them are quite long investigations. Also, some might be paused due to, say, court cases. So we do find that some of the numbers then, when we get to the annual report, you'll have a more accurate number across the whole year. Some of the things that you're seeing in the 6-month report then may change. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's just to remind the Governance and Audit Committee members, the remit we have is to review and assess the authority's ability to handle complaints effectively. So obviously the focus for us is around the KPI targets and the timelines, which is an indicator that you managing them effectively. And I'm quite confident that that's the case. And what I'm seeing in this report, it appears that you are slight decline in some areas, but you're clearly aware of the reasons why behind that. I was pleased to see compliments in this report, because it's easy to criticise, but you don't often see the compliments. So thank you for that. And also the stakeholder participation. I think that's key to, you know, the work that the council are doing across the piece. And I'm really pleased to see that stakeholders are getting involved in this important area as well. Any comments? Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. Yeah, you've obviously mentioned the main sort of frontline services, highways, court building services, waste and that. Obviously, some of these complaints are out of the complete control of the department. Like for instance, within the corporate building, they cover the housing services, and if a tenant wants work done and then they cancel and they don't inform the department, you know, of an appointment. So, you know, it's just taken into consideration as well when we look at these complaints. And also in regards to the redress, obviously states about the payments being given. Are you able to inform the committee as to what those claims have actually been made for? You know, if possible, because I know especially with highways, people get complaints about the roads, and that's perhaps that work is perhaps being carried out by a utility company working in an area, and then the council have got to go back and put the area, if it's a road surface or a pavement, we've got to go and put that right. And in the meantime, perhaps somebody put a claim in against the council.
Yes, just on your first point, Councillor White. Yes, we do take it into consideration. I mean, especially where you have areas where the bin lorry may break down and things like that, and certain collections may not be able to be taken. Also, as you say, if you can't gain access to a tenant's property, yes, we do take that into consideration. That comes into play with the upheld or justified or not when we're looking at that. So yeah, and we have conversations with the complainant as well as with the department. So as the complaints team, they work closely with both sides, and wherever we can resolve things quickly without things becoming a complaint, obviously then that's our aim. So yes, definitely with that one. In terms of the detail on the financial redress, yes, no problem. I can follow up with the committee on a list of all the ones that you see here in a bit more detail, if that's helpful.
Yeah, they say, I think it does, you know, anything goes wrong, it's the fault of the council every time. We see that as members, you know, but it may be, as I said earlier in the early comment, that sometimes we get utility companies working in an area, they make a botch of a job, then it's the council got to go out and try and redress that problem, you know, and then somebody in the meantime, if somebody perhaps will put a claim in against the council, you know, for plus damages if a damage to a vehicle or somebody has fallen or over and sustained an injury.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Lewis.
Yeah, thanks, sir. The redress, are we insured for that redress as a council, or does it come out of a pot that we have?
No, it wouldn't usually. The kind of things that we're seeing in financial redress aren't normally things covered by insurance. No.
I think the financial redress is relatively low in value, though, isn't it? So I think it's important to note that.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Any further questions for Sarah? No? Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing the annual report in due course. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item 9. This is for information report. This report you have in front of you has been to the Cabinet on the 20th of March. And obviously there's also a role for scrutiny committees in this. There is a requirement for the Audit Committee to be aware of the performance monitoring arrangements, and what we're seeing is just this, but it is for information. There are no officers here expected to answer questions. So if we have any questions, then we need to feed those through to Jeremy, and the appropriate officer can respond at a future meeting. So I don't intend to open this up for questions, but if anyone has questions, then please can you channel them through Jeremy, and then we will get responses to those questions and bring them back. Is that okay, Jeremy? Yeah. Is that okay, Ness? Ness, you still with us?
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yes, that's fine, Chair. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that's for information. So if we move on to agenda item 10, which is the Governance and Audit Committee Tracker Report. There are some items which are ongoing to be confirmed. So we can pick those up for the next meeting, Jeremy, and hopefully we'll see some dates appearing in those. Move quickly on to agenda item 11, which is our current work plan. Obviously that takes us to June, and then there'll be the new municipal year. Is it new? Oh, that's great. So we've got that in plan for June. We need to add in the meeting with the private meetings with the internal audit, external auditors to that plan, and any future training requirements as we move forward into 25-26. And I think that's it. The terms of reference are there for both the Scrutiny Committee and the Governance and Audit Committee to make sure that we're not overlapping, duplicating or missing anything between the two key committees. And if there are no questions on those papers, then I think we've come to the end of the meeting today. Can I thank everyone for their attendance, thank the officers also for coming in today. It's quite nice to see faces around the table as well as those that are through Teams. But thank everyone for your participation. Some really good questions coming out today and some good reports presented by officers. So thank you very much, and I'll see you at the next meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye now. Bye.